All right. Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, Doctor. Good evening.
Yes.
Right. Very well.
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Thank you. So sorry we've started a little bit late, but we hope we'll be able to make it and cover the time. We have slightly fewer slides today, this evening. Keeping a few things. Right. I hope everybody has been okay. I've heard, of course, a few will not be in class. Those who are feeling unwell, we say pole for them. Yeah, I've seen some few people indicate so. Right, we're sorry for that. So strategy, according to our course description, we were to look at both organizational strategy plus organizational culture, but I noticed the amount of work that is heavy, we may not be able to deal with the two together. So this week, once more again, we are reflecting on organizational strategy. To begin us off then, on our discussion this week, I would like to reflect on a small, tiny kind of meditation as we begin this class about committing ourselves in the hands of God, committing our plans to God, so that we can understand the Christian perspective of what we mean by organizational strategy. Every other week, I try to model a devotion around the topic of the week. So this week, we begin to look at organizational strategy by reflecting on the ability to place our plans, to place our commitments in the hands of God. I request somebody to read for us meditatively what is projected before us. Kindly.
Okay, I can read. Committing to divine will, we can plan for the future, but we must commit our plans to God. To man belong the plans of the heart, but from the Lord comes the reply of the tongue. All a man's ways seem innocent to him, but motives are weighed by the Lord. Commit to the Lord whatever you do, and your plans will succeed. That is Proverbs chapter 16, 1-3. Thank you.
Very well. So, reflecting on those words of Proverbs, just to go over it again, we can plan for the future, but we must commit our plans, if you like, to divine will. You know, occasionally we may talk with our lips, we may talk in words, but although God attends to these words as we put them in prayer, I think what the writer of the Proverbs is trying to tell us, that motives have a greater weight. Motives define why we do the things we do. Motives define our commitment. We may appear to be so innocent in what we say and occasionally what we pretend to do, yet our motives could be yards away from those pretentious actions. The writer of the Proverbs tells us, or rather requests us, to commit to the Lord whatever we want to accomplish. Once we do this, seemingly we are guaranteed of success. I've said here before in one of the classes that the greatest thing we need to focus on as managers is not so much to succeed, but we need to focus on being faithful in doing what is right. Occasionally, there is a distinction between what is right and what is good. Sometimes the two do not refer to the same things. We might judge something to be good to us very subjectively, just to discover objectively what we are judging to be so good. It is not the right thing. I've requested you in previous classes and admonished you that it's good to commit ourselves to doing what is right. When we commit ourselves to doing what is right, and then we recognize that success belongs to God Himself. He's the one to grant, and not us. So how do we manage to do this in a better Christian perspective? I've been thinking and came across this illustration that gives us certain levels of how we are supposed to behave and act whenever we find ourselves, so that whatever we do finds its bearing in the divine will. Thinkers have put it that the foundation of all that we need to do is founded on a threefold, a tripartite command. A tripartite command. One, to obey God, to love God, and to love neighbors. These words sound very commonplace whenever we reflect on them. But occasionally, when it comes to action, it's not very easy, dear friends, let's face it, it's not very easy to obey God, to love neighbors. Seemingly, the foundation itself occasionally becomes shaky in what we do. You see, that foundation gives us the hierarchy of priorities. Love God, obey God, and then love neighbors, and all other things will be found in place. So once that foundation is placed, then just like we are building a house, and the contractor begins by inputting in that foundation. If that house is going to be built near a swampy place, then the contractor must make the right judgment of what must go into that foundation in terms of the depth of the foundation, the metal bars, the steel bars, and so forth, how the concrete is going to be mixed, and so forth, the foundation. So once the foundation is constructed, then the superstructure of that building begins. It goes on. The superstructure goes on, then the roofing will come on, and then the finishes will come. In a similar analogy, once the foundation is laid well, sometimes and occasionally, the foundation will never be visible to the naked eye after the building has been completed. But the life, the strength of that building will depend so much on that which is invisible. So the foundation, obedience to God, the love of neighbor, is that foundation that must find its place in our hearts as we move to those organizations. That must find its place in our hearts. Nobody will see or will penetrate his or her empirical eyes to guess what is in our hearts. But indeed, what finds itself in our hearts will offer the foundation upon which the superstructure will be laid, upon which the construction of the roofing, however heavy it will be, whether we use steel bars on the roofing, the foundation is the hallmark. That foundation will support the finishes we put on the building. That is the analogy before us in this slide, that upon this foundation of obedience and love to God and neighbor is built the first level where we are commanded to operate according to godly values and principles. And then we discover the values, we discover the principles, and we act according to those values and principles. You see, if we don't have the foundation, then the superstructure, the laying of block and mortar upon each other, the operating according to divine values and principles becomes incomprehensible. We cannot comprehend the possibility of that. Then once, whatever we do in those organizations, in those schools, in those banking halls, in those NGO offices, when we go to the field to reach out in outreach, NGO outreach, and so forth, you see, that activity we do must operate according to those divine values and principles. And then we move that way in life. And then after that first level, we now move into, as it were, the second level. You see, on the first level, values and principles lie in our hearts, cemented on God's love, obedience to God, and love of neighbor. And then that produces the values and principles. After this, those values and the principles become explicit in whatever we do, becomes clearly explicit in what we are doing. So that when we go out for an outreach, as it were, when we sit in those offices to act, people can discover that strategy in our hearts and how we operate. The third and final level is level 3, whereby now we operate with a gospel-oriented mission. Now, gospel-oriented mission is supposed to bring the element of sacrifice, giving ourselves for the sake of others. We may not exactly be able to do it the way he's going to as it were, do it figuratively at the end of this week when we celebrate the Paschal mysteries. We may not exactly be able to do that. But as we find ourselves everywhere, I address each one of you in your capacities where you work. You work with the people. People come before you. I address the majority of you who are trained teachers, who find themselves in schools, who find themselves standing before learners. You know, how do we die ourselves for the sake of those learners? You know, the figurative idea is when you operate in darkness, you enter a dark room and you light a candle and put it on the table or a candlestick. Have you ever noticed that for there to be continuous light in that room, the candle must keep on burning? And whenever the candle burns, have you ever realized that it consumes itself? Look at that analogy, dear friends, that a candle consumes itself so that we can see light. If you are to be reading at night and you have no electricity and you put on a candle, and tomorrow you are handing in an assignment, it was a deadline, notice that for you to hand in that assignment, a candle consumed itself. That is the mystery of strategy. The idea is we find ourselves in those organizations, and the third level addresses us, or rather summons us to operate with a gospel-oriented mission. The gospel-oriented mission is it can be summed up, for example, in the words of St. Paul, as sacrificial love, whereby we must kujitolea, we must burn ourselves. For you people who are teachers in this classroom, we go to work not for a pay, though we need that pay, not for a pay because no country, no society can pay a teacher. Nobody at all can manage to pay a teacher. Tokens are given to keep the teacher moving so that he can be at service of knowledge. But we must burn ourselves. We must express that sacrificial love. We must express a dying spirit to make the world better. Finally, I would like to say that for those of you who are teachers, you move around this society and you are discouraged by quite a little bit of many things. You drive on the roads, you walk on the roads, and you see policemen take bribes. You move around, you enter some office, and you are not served well, and you don't like it. You go to a hospital where you want to be served, and you realize you are not being served well by those nurses and the like, and so forth. You are unhappy, of course. Come to think of it, come to realize that the police officers of tomorrow, the teachers of tomorrow, the nurses and doctors of tomorrow, office bearers of tomorrow, constantly sit before a teacher. You stand before all the professionals of tomorrow. How can we act so that our actions can change tomorrow? We may be unhappy with the policeman we met on the road today. We might be unhappy with the sub-chief that we appeared in his office today. We might be happy with the way that nurse served us last week. But notice that the nurse will be there 10 years, 20 years from now. The nurse will be there 15 years from now, is that child who sits before you. How can we act in such a manner that our actions transform the society? 2 or 3 sharing, and then we begin. Anybody?
Okay, Doctor, if I may try,
Yes, Juliet.
it's quite tough question to answer, but I think throughout this course and especially this semester, most of the units we've been handling talks about leadership, and what comes out very clearly is the godly leadership. Even as wherever we are leaders, but the greatest thing I am learning from every unit that we are handling, this one is one of them, the biblical foundations of leadership, and then also the prof's class of leadership. One thing is standing out for me, that the foundation of my leadership should be based on the godly standards and principles. And so that means that whatever I do, I need to do it like God is the one I am answerable to. If Jesus were here, what would he say? Will he applaud me or will he do something for me? I am reminded we have been doing exams from last weekend. We were issued with some rules. Yes, was it? Yeah. Sunday evening, they were posted on the group WhatsApp, and we were being reminded when you're going for invigilation, no phones, a number of things that were mentioned there. And I was like, what if I carry my phone and I just have it in my pocket, and there's just a way I can cover myself, and I even have my earpods, and nobody will know that I'm there. I might not be really using it, somebody seeing it in my hand, but I'll be listening to something. The main thing, they want to see me invigilating. Then it's like the Spirit of God quickens me. Like you may be listening to something, a sermon, a gospel song, but are you really doing the right thing? You may be getting that, but is it what I have called on you? Because as a believer, number one, you need to be obedient to the laws or the rules of the land where you are. So which Christianity will I be portraying? And so in other words, it means that first of all, with my colleagues, I need to lead by example. If they know that I'm a believer, then I must be among the people who are obedient to the rules of the school, starting from what you are being called upon as teachers to do. And I think that one really slapped me on the face, and I was like, for sure, God, you have rebuked me there. And I thank you so much. And I was just reminded of what we have been learning here, coming out clean and just outstanding. And yesterday, Prof was reminding us that as a teacher, whatever we learn here, it is going to be helpful, or it will be realized when that thing is transforming me and I am practicing out there. So that even when I tell my learners that I need them to be obedient, I need them to follow instructions. Am I following instructions myself? How am I addressing them? What kind of language am I using before them? Even when I'm annoyed, how do I address them? And so many other things. Because just as you've told us this evening, that what can I do so that I leave an impact in the lives of those that I'm interacting with? Let me show them love. Let me remind them that they are good, even if maybe they might not be really portraying that in them. But let me just remind them that you are able to do it. And I do it by an example. The love that I talk about, let them see that love coming from me first. I'm not biased. I don't choose the students that are performing well to show some kinds of favoritism, but I'm okay with all of them and so on. So basically, I think it's all about leading by example, starting with your colleagues down to the learners that we are addressing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Juliet. Maybe one last one. One last one, if any. Right. If there is none, may I request?
Good evening.
Yes, Obada. Yes. Good evening.
Yeah, I thought that I should maybe just say something small about the scripture that we read. It, I think it reminded me of a few things about also what I was reading today in in the material that you were given by Prof. In class of leadership. That was the keynote that I think it's highlighted in chapter 6 say that what has been true for me can be true for you too. You will never climb right mountains without trusting God, engaging in the ultimate act of religious training, sacrifice, and making bold moves. I think from the scripture that we read, the scripture took me back to that statement. And I was looking at it the place that God holds in our various responsibilities that we have. That God is at the center of everything that we are doing. He is at the center of the success, the achievement that we've made in life. And without Him, we can really achieve little, especially in our various positions that God has placed us. Remember, the Bible says that whatever we do, we should do as if we are doing it for Christ. Because I think in the end, and the Bible says, caution teachers. And I want to understand that it is in the Bible, the biblical perspective, but it caution teaches that in the end, they will have a big chunk to share before the Lord. I think it comes with that aspect that when God puts you in a teaching position, it means that He has put the whole nation into your hand, and you can give the kid, or you can give whoever is listening to your voice the direction of a futuristic direction. So just take this opportunity to encourage also my colleagues that whatever we find to do, whenever we find ourselves doing or acting in action, the calling that the Lord has put in our hand and in our heart, let's do it as if we're doing for Christ, because He is the author and the finisher of our faith.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Obada. Now, could Caroline Dunge, could you pray for us? We begin. Caroline?
Yes, let us pray. Our Heavenly Father, we thank.
Did I lose Caroline? I seem to have lost Caroline. Perhaps Esther Jane, are you around?
No, our colleagues, we commit ourselves before you. God, this term is getting near to the end. We are praying for more grace. We are praying for just the resilience to be able to keep up with every assignment that is ahead of us and achieve the objectives of the semester. Lord, we pray that you're going to bless our lecturers and bless all the faculties that are coordinating to see us through this program. We thank you and we bless your name in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Caroline. So as I've indicated before, we are looking at organizational strategy, and our learning focus this week is to understand the concept organizational strategy, to struggle and understand what it means and what its implication is for us in the organizations we find ourselves in, be it in schools, be it in church organizations, NGOs, and so forth. Second, we'll try to justify our discussion by answering the question why we need organizational strategies in our organizations. There are so many organizations, we could be part of them, that exist without this idea of organizational strategy. We'll ask ourselves whether it is possible for those organizations to continue existing that way but still succeed. Third, we look at the various levels of organizational strategy. In these levels, we'll see how organizational strategy can exist in about 3 levels, at the corporate level and so forth, until at the lowest level of individual and team spirit. Fourth, we will try to exemplify organizational strategies. We'll exemplify how organizational strategies look like. The aim of this learning is actually to produce practical leaders, practical managers in us. So not just theoretically to say we need organizational strategies, but rather to be able to see, as it were, what an organizational strategy is in practice. Towards the end, we look at various categories of organizational strategy. We'll try to understand various categories, about 7 of them, be able to understand what all this means. This will help us, of course, to be able to choose within the organization we find ourselves in, to choose the direction we take, the category we appeal to when we are making or designing our organizational strategies. We'll finish by trying to put our fingers on the key elements that characterize an organizational strategy. These elements should help us investigate and interrogate what sometimes we call strategies in organizations, yet indeed they may not be strategies as it were. So to take us through then, we want to look at just to look at it, we have organizations. These organizations have goals. These organizations have purposes that they want to arrive at. So as it were, as we ask ourselves, or rather we interrogate what organizational strategies are, we recognize that every organization, be it a school, be it a banking institution, be it an NGO, be it a church organization, and so forth, it needs to survive and be there tomorrow. It needs to survive to achieve its goals, its purposes. Yet, organizations exist in a myriad of really challenges. You know, we find ourselves within those organizations in what we have described in the past as environmental uncertainties. We do not know about tomorrow, the ever-dynamic landscape within organizational environment. There is increasing competitiveness, or rather competition among organizations. There are new technologies coming up in this globalized 21st century society. Yet in the midst of all these, organizations need to survive. There is a need as a teacher in that school, as a manager in that bank, as a manager, or rather whatever the level of our employability within that organization. There is a need for us to keep up and contribute to the organizational effectiveness and development. To be able to do this, our organizations, through even individual employees we are, need to develop an ability to respond, to adopt and adjust to the changes within the context of all those social processes and dynamics. Therefore, come to realize that whether an organization fails or an organization succeeds, this does not happen as an accident. You see, often, even when we have failure, you can be able to recognize that failure within organizational processes before that failure comes. Organizations don't just succeed or fail. Either somebody deliberately does what ought to be done to succeed, or sometimes, even if it is not deliberate, fails to do that which ought to be done, and so the failure comes. Therefore, organizational success is often found to be contingent, or rather dependent, on organizational strategy and culture. The strategy we develop as an organization, the culture we develop within an organization have, or rather exhibit, a direct influence on the success of that organization. The way those organizations will make use of the opportunities, the way they'll be able to control the risk around them will be so much dependent on the strategies and the cultures that we develop within those organizations. So what to note is that we must deliberately work, we must deliberately do something to contribute to the organizational success, as it were. So in understanding that kind of environment in our organizations, then we need really to recognize that we need to define an organization in a manner that will develop strategies that can be able to help us. So what is an organizational strategy? What is an organizational strategy? An organizational strategy can be defined as that long-term plan that allocates how an organization plans to use its resources, how it will make priorities in the task that is engaged in, how it will make, or rather model, its decisions. All this to the service of the goals of that organization. Therefore, in defining an organizational strategy, we are trying to look at a long-term plan. You see, this concept of long-term plan could easily be touching on the life existence of that organization. You see, certain things, certain objectives may change, but you see, an organizational strategy is about the purpose for which that organization exists. Organizational strategies actually guides the organization in the context of its employees, its management, towards achieving the set organizational goals and objectives. Therefore, even when we develop strategic plans within an organization, strategic plans are simply at the service, at the altar of organizational strategy. These organizational strategies often detail, often explain to us how organizations are able to move around so that its objectives are met, as it were. Therefore, organizational strategy is simply a framing of our organizations, how the model of organization is going to be conveyed, is going to be administered. Organizational strategy, as I've said before, influences nearly every sector, every element of that organization. So you notice when we are defining organizational strategy, we are more or less touching every core of an organization, the things people do within that organization, the way resources are distributed within that organization. All this is an element of the strategies developed within those organizations, as it were. So why is organizational strategy important? Why is organizational strategy important? Why do we need organizational strategy? Remember, organizational strategy is that long-term plan that has something to do with how organizational structure shall be done, how organizational design shall be done, how organizational culture will be developed, how all those elements of the organizational structure will be put together towards really the achievement of that organizational goal. So that's why we need to ask ourselves, why do we really need organizational strategies. Generally, organizational strategies helps organizations or businesses to effectively focus on their goals in three important ways. One, by providing guidance and consistency in their actions. Second, by defining and focusing priorities towards a common goal. And thirdly, by enabling simplified and focused decision-making processes. This will be done when we are able to clarify the best ways to reach organizational goals, as it were. Then here is just a summary of why organizational strategy are such important in an organization. First, organizational strategies actually align the organizational efforts. You see, an effective organizational strategy must be able to align the efforts of every individual, every team, as it were. So there is a way an organizational strategy helps the organization to align its efforts. You see, once an organization's efforts are not aligned in a particular direction, once an organizational strategies are not aligned towards the purpose for which the organization exists, then generally, actually, it will be very hard to achieve those goals. Strategies within an organization helps to gather together the efforts within that organization. Efforts may touch on resources, efforts may touch on what the people in that organization will focus on, and so forth. You see, take an example of a school. We have discovered in that school that the learners could do better if it was not for their performance in the subject history, if it was not for their performance in mathematics, in chemistry, and so forth. Now, once we discover this and we have a mean score to achieve, we have a performance yardstick to achieve, we have an organizational strategy to achieve, and then that strategy might produce the need for alignment, where now we'll be able to say, can we have all the mathematics teachers engage in team teaching of that classroom, or that candidate classroom? Could it be that there is a teacher who performs better in instructing a given topic than the other teachers, and so forth? Alignment of effort. The second major reason why organizational strategies are critical, are such critical for an organization, is goal clarity. Organizational strategies helps in clarifying goals for the organization. It provides clarity on the company's long-term goals and short-term objectives. This clarity, you see, in turn, will enable employees to understand their roles in achieving these goals, in fostering a sense of purpose and motivation. So you notice, once we have goals within the organization, those goals become more clarified when we have clear organizational strategies. Thirdly, we talk about resource optimization. Resource optimization. Organizational strategy that is effectively constructed helps in the allocation of resources, including the financial resource, the human resource. Think about the technological resource. Indeed, in the most efficient manner, if we want to achieve success, then resources must be put at the right point. So this optimization prevents wastage within an organization. It enhances competitiveness within that organization. The fourth critical importance of organizational strategy is that organizational strategy helps in risk mitigation. You know, we ask ourselves, how well positioned is our organizational performance, for example? You may ask it in a different way. If you are a manager within an organization, how do you want, to perform in future within that organization? So by making a clear assessment of the potential risks and the challenges, organizational strategies allows an organization to develop contingency plans and risk mitigation strategies. So you can now see the elements that are part of an organizational strategy. Listen to that terminology, organizational strategy, as if to say, how do we want to survive tomorrow? How do we want to exist tomorrow? The fifth important idea why organizational strategies are such central to organizational success is that organizational strategies define an organization's competitive advantage. A well-crafted strategy will have to identify the organization's unique strengths and opportunities. It will have to allow for that differentiation in the market. As it were, it will help a good strategic plan, as we'll see, will be able to help that organization on how to focus, to differentiate where it wants to focus within the market. You see, you have various focus. You are having a company that has 3-4 products. Product 3 and 4, they are not performing as well. Product 2 is performing averagely in the market. Product 1 is doing very well. How do we focus our strategies towards that? Let us perhaps produce this practically in our schools. If you are to talk to many teachers in high schools today and ask them why their Form 4 students of last year, the candidates of last year, performed decimally, they'll have to tell you that it's because of a new grading structure whereby effort, or rather emphasis, was put in what the student was able to perform better at. So that you find in some schools, learners or candidates may have been advised erroneously. You go to a school whereby their performance in STEM perhaps was dismal, but these learners had a tendency to perform better in humanities, in history, in religion, in geography, and so forth. But notice that the teachers, the headmaster, the headmistress of the school kept on insisting to the learners, unless you perform well in mathematics, unless you perform well in chemistry, in physics, whatever, you are as good as having not performed. No emphasis was placed on history. As it were, words were used closer to, what will history help you if you pass history and you fail in the science subjects? Now, you discover at the end, very little efforts were placed by the learners in that subject that they would have performed better. They ended up, when the results came, in performing poorly in those sciences because they could not perform otherwise. Yet, they again performed very poorly in history, in theory, because, as it were, they had never placed some efforts in those subjects. Therefore, this school, this learner, undermined his or her competitive advantage. His competitive advantage would have been situated in better performance in history, in better performance in geography, and so forth. The sixth critical importance of organizational strategy is innovation promotion. organizational strategy can foster a culture of innovation. It can encourage the exploration of new ideas and approaches. Remember, organizational strategy sets the ideals for which the organization wants to live for. By setting these ideals, we can venture into new avenues of having to achieve them. Towards the end, organizational strategies are important in actually creating a disposition of adaptability for an organization within the changing landscape of organizations, within the changing the dynamic environmental situation that organizations find themselves in. The manner in which a school, a company is going to adopt to survive amidst the threats that it faces will depend on the effectiveness of its organizational strategies. We can say the same about all other importances, but just to emphasize that it's important to recognize that for organizations to succeed, there must be an effective setting of organizational strategy. So, having said that, it's important to help ourselves recognize the fundamental difference between what we can call an organizational strategy, an organizational plan, or organizational model. Some authors use the concepts business interchangeably with organization, interchangeably with the companies. So if you want to look at the distinctions between these concepts, business strategy, or rather organizational strategy, organizational plan, organizational model, think about the purpose. What is the purpose of an organizational strategy? What is the purpose of an organizational plan? What is the purpose of an organizational model? Organizational strategy outlines the long-term vision and direction of the organization. Organizational plan serves as a roadmap to achieve the short-term strategies, the short-term goals that when achieved, they add up to the achievement of that long-term. You see, when we talk about a 10-year, a 5-year strategic plan, we move down to have, the specific plans, what will be achieved within every year, what will be achieved, quarterly in the year, and so forth. These plans, those short-term achievements, those short-term goals that contribute to the overall long-term vision and direction that the organization wants to take defines the organizational plan. Sorry for that. A model explains the fundamental logic of how the organization operates and generates revenue. You see, if you go to schools now, there is the indication that within those schools, parents are not paying fees, or rather the fee payment is relatively poor. Yet again, there is poor government remittance of the funds that are due to free day education, secondary education. A business model, an organization model will be, how does that school plan to raise revenue? Is the school planning, for example, to come up, for example, with the perhaps renting some land and planting some of the crops, vegetables? Is the school planning to kind of talk to the politicians to bring in a little bit of the bursaries and so forth? You see, how do you now plan to generate, to operate within the challenges that you find yourselves in. Talk about the focus. The focus of an organizational strategy is to identify that overarching, that overall goal, that overall target market, is to identify the competitive advantage, at the organizational level, to identify the tactics that can be used to succeed. The plan will now break that strategy into actionable plans, the how to do it within time frames. The model would be, what are the key components? Like, for example, how will we satisfy the customer segment? How will we, for example, define, or rather structure the organizational structure to respond to the costs involved? When you talk about, for example, the components of an organizational strategy will be about the market analysis. Organizational strategy looks at the bigger picture, where the organization wants to go. Organizational plan talks about the short-term dealings that will help the organization reach there. The explanation. The organization model will put in place the logic that will make those plans work. So if you like, models are at the service of organizational plans, which are ultimately at the service of organizational strategies, as it were. There are various levels of organizational strategy. Some authors simply group these levels in three kind of segments. They talk about the corporate, the business, and the functional strategy. Other authors distinguish within the functional strategy what can be referred to as the operational strategy, and therefore giving us 4 levels of organizational strategy. At the corporate strategy, or rather the corporate strategy exists really at the topmost level of an organization. This is now the manager, the management team that is now focusing on the long-term objectives. But remember, these long-term objectives will come down to influence, as it were, the short-term, the short-term activities that organization will be engaged in. So you notice the corporate strategy talks about where the organization wants to go. The corporate level strategy, if you like, is the highest level of an organization. The choices, the decisions made at the corporate level will impact on the organizational goal in a bigger way. So really, when you are a leader, a corporate leader, an organizational leader, you operate at this level of the organization. At this level, decision makers will be ensuring that each department and each team is working towards the realization of that overall corporate strategy. So corporate level strategy defines where the entire organization wants to go. The business level strategy is defined at the segment, the various segment. The emphasis is placed on the products and the services that organization wants to achieve. Putting this in the context of a school or an educational setting, corporate strategy will be about where the school wants to go, where the school, the performance index that the school wants to achieve. Occasionally, organizational strategies, especially in the education sector, will be revealed in what we call the mission, the vision and mission of a school, of an educational institution. So at the corporate level, you will now see those school mission at the school's signpost to become whatever kind of school. That is a corporate strategy. What the school wants to be known of. The business strategy can now be defined, for example, at the departmental level within those schools. If I put it, though, in a kind of a small way, just a figurative way, if you look at the corporate strategy as the mean score that school wants to achieve this year, then every other department, the humanities department, the science and technology departments, whatever departments, will come up and set their own goals. And these goals, these strategies, must be seen to be in line with what the overall school strategy wants to achieve. Now, the functional strategy designs the approach for functions, if you like, designs the approach for departments. So how will they achieve that departmental strategy, if you like? How will they achieve that, departmental or subject-oriented mean score that finally must contribute to the overall achievement of the school? Now, when you talk about operational strategy now outlines the tactical steps. If you like, it outlines the actions needed to drive the organization to implement that change that finally must serve the functional, the business, and ultimately the corporate strategy. So you'll now hear how many times, for example, will the learners be tested? By what time should the curriculum, the academic curriculum, be, as it were, covered? Operational strategy would be about, do we come to teach these learners in weekends or whatever? What will the parents contribute towards this? Operational, how do we operate? What roles do we play so that we can realize the functional strategy? So you notice all these levels contribute towards the achievement of that overall organizational strategy. So you see, within an organization, you must distinguish the corporate strategy at the organizational level, the business strategy, the functional strategies, and the operational strategies. So in this case, you'd want to imagine in an educational setting, in a school setting, what is the mission, the vision of that school? What is the mission, vision of that department, of that classroom? How do the learners in that classroom, how do the teachers in that staff room, in that classroom operate, function to achieve what they have set to achieve? Now, how do we define organizational strategy goals? How do we define them? How do we create organizational strategy goals? Remember, organizational strategy can take many shapes. So here we look at just examples of this. An organizational strategy goal can be defined in a statement like, the company KPLC, the Kenya Power Lighting Company. If, for example, this company was to make an organizational strategy, then in the midst of people complaining about the cost of electricity and such like things. They'll come up with an organizational strategy and define themselves as focusing on becoming a cost leader within the production and the distribution of power and energy. You can see what that means. So then everything they will do will now be harnessed towards serving that organizational strategy. An organizational strategy could be defined in terms of to be able to create differentiation between ourselves and competitors, our competitors, through product innovation. So that if this was a sugar company, there are so many sugar companies, sugar factories in the market. Then this particular company, if it is Mumias Sugar, Sony Sugar, whatever, Chemily, comes up with an organizational strategy, and the organizational strategy is focusing on helping it to create a differentiation between themselves and the competitors through product innovation, if you like, value addition within the production of sugar. How do they make their sugar in such a manner that the product they make, it's such innovated that it competes powerfully against its competitors? So the question is, how does Mumias Sugar Company produce sugar that will be seen to appeal to the customers more than any other sugar produced by other companies? You could create an organizational strategy goal that runs in terms of to be able to generate goodwill and stronger sales through ethical practices. So the idea here is you are in competition with the competitors, with other companies. As it were, you've heard that customers are criticizing other companies, what other companies do. So you come up with an organizational strategy goal whereby you focus on generating goodwill in your customers. You focus on generating goodwill that will cause stronger sales. And how are you going to do this? By promoting ethical practices. You know, the fourth type, rather not really type, the fourth example, as it were, of an organizational strategy could be, you could define it in terms of to position ourselves as a company as a desirable luxury brand. So perhaps, you know, this is a tour company, a tour organization. How are you going to position yourself as a company, as the company that is most desired by the customers, as a luxury brand? So against this, then, think about how you'd be able to create strategic goals for the organization you belong to. You could be belonging to a security firm. The question is, how do you create a strategy that will market that strategy, that security firm? How do you create that school? You are a proprietor of a private school. How do you come up with an organizational strategy goal that endears that organization in such a manner that customers are attracted to it, or rather you move towards organizational success? So you get what we are talking about, organizational strategies. Yet I would like you to see organizational strategies are not empty statements. They must be reasoned statements that talk about what we want to achieve. They must be reasoned statements that, as it were, influence action. both at the corporate level and at the employee level. Now, there are various categories of organizational strategies. So these are the various categories. You want to form, rather you want to define an organizational strategy for your company, for your organization, for your school, for your NGO, and so forth. What category of strategies do you define the strategies of that company in? Are your organizational strategies focusing on cost leadership? Are they focusing on differentiation? Are they emphasizing, or rather focusing on the concept of organizational focus, so that we'll be able to say, what are you focusing on within your organization? Are your strategies about the growth elements within the organization? Are you focusing your organizational strategy on reasoned dynamics within your organization, and therefore the rationalization strategy? Are we talking about product innovation, the value addition you put in your strategies? Or are you talking about the digital transformation strategies? All these are various categories of organizational strategies that we have. We are going to look at each one of these just to help us understand what organizational strategies are all about. So this is the cost leadership organizational strategy. You see, cost leadership. You want to become a leader in the context of costs of what you produce. You see, to give the examples, to use the examples that I've already given. You are an MD, a CEO of a given sugar company. How do you become a leader in the cost of sugar? Are you going to invest, for example, in the quality of sugar, so that those who use your sugar, although 1 kilo of sugar is supposed to cost, say, 200, you are going to leverage in such a manner that your kilo of sugar will cost slightly less, but still you'll be able to harness and optimize your effort, your profits, as it were. When we talk about cost leadership strategy, we are talking about leading your particular market within a given product with regard to the cost of goods and services you provide. In other words, your goal is to have the best, where the best will be defined as the lowest prices in a particular product, as it were. So that you are looking at, what do your competitors charge and what are you going to charge? Talk about, for example, in data platform, in data bundles. How does Safaricom charge its data bundles? And how does Airtel charge its data bundles? The cost leadership strategy focuses on the operational efficiency and economies of scale to maintain a competitive advantage over its competitors. It makes a business more attractive to clients and customers when you bring, for example, your costs down. But as you are able to do this, you must always think about the quality of the services you give. That's why we say, while really the cost leadership strategy is such important, it cannot just be useful for all businesses. You must be able to look at the business you are trying to run, the organization you are trying to run, and be able to see How will we leverage on this? And to be able to do this, to be able to effectively run the cost leadership strategy, you must be able to identify, for example, the cost drivers. You must be able to re-engineer the processes of production, for example. Think about, for example, outsourcing. For example, if you are a school or if you are a university, if you are whatever the organization, an NGO, think about the benefit you are likely to draw from outsourcing cleaners than employing cleaners. That may give you a cost leadership advantage. Think about how you maneuver the economies of scale. We've said that. So that you are trying to say, if I put in this, what am I likely to get? If I remove this cost within the production, will I be able still to get the right quality and be able to get an advantage of my customers? Think really cost leadership strategy. You are thinking about how to become a leader within the sales of a given product, as it were. You are thinking about how to become a leader, how to command leadership within the sales of that particular product. I've given you examples. Is it data bundles? Is it the sugar you produce? Is it the bread you produce? How do you produce still, say, 80 grams weighted loaf of bread, the way other companies are producing 80 grams, but sell it for less, but still make your profits? That's what we are talking about, becoming a leader within the cost bracket of your niche. This is what we define as cost leadership strategy. If you run a school, think about it. Can you be able to offer the services other schools are offering if it's a private school, but be able to charge less fees, but still be able to offer quality, competitive educational services? That is cost leadership strategy. What are the things you do to realize that? When you define those things, those strategies you are going to put in place, then you are defining yourself in the context of cost leadership strategy, as it were. Then think about, really, as you are thinking about those categories, think about the second one, which is the differentiation organizational strategy. The differentiation organizational strategy. Remember, for cost leadership strategy, you are focusing on becoming a leader. So when you are talking about the differentiation strategy, this one involves two general approaches. Before we explain this slide, differentiation involves two general approaches. These are either you can choose to make your product or service different from those of your competitors. So make your product, design your service in such a manner that it comes out as being very different from those of your competitors. So if you are producing bread as a company, in the cost leadership strategy, you are thinking of how do I lower the price of a loaf of bread that weighs 80 grams, but still gain a profit advantage and success, gain survival. In differentiation strategy, you are now not thinking about the cost of that loaf of bread that is 80 grams, but you are now thinking, what of if I still made 80-gram loaf of bread, but charged it more. Now you see, this could be the opposite of the first one. Charged it more. But you see, if you are going to charge it more and survive in the market, then you must think about the differentiation strategy. Differentiation strategy means, how will you be able to make your loaf of bread, be different? That's the concept, differentiation. Become different from other loaves of bread that still cost 80 grams, as it were. So that first approach of the differentiation strategy is to make your product, to make your service completely
Have we lost Mwalimu?
Yes, his network keeps on throwing him off, but he'll be back.
Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we lost you for a while. Now you're back. Thank you.
Yeah, I noticed that I'd been thrown out. Sorry for that. Sorry for that. So we are looking at the differentiation strategy. Sorry for that. My network, a little bit problematic, but we'll manage. So when we are talking about the differentiation strategy, I've just explained that in this one, you are trying to ask yourself from the concept, how do you become different? The cost leadership strategy, the concept is,
Yes, Doctor.
become a leader offering the best prices, the best cost for the services. The differentiation strategy is, how do you become different? And I'm giving that example of the production of that loaf of bread. And the question is, in the production of that loaf of bread, how do you become, how do you make your loaf of bread become different, as it were? So I was explaining there are two ways to doing that. Either you make your loaf of bread become simply different from the one being produced by your competitors. You can also make your loaf of bread and your other services become more attractive than those of your competitors. So what is this you are going to do to that loaf of bread? Is it its taste, its aroma? Is it even its shape? Are you discovering that, some of your customers would prefer if, the shape of the loaf of bread was different from the conventional one? Oh, just a moment. Just a moment. Is the screen available to you now?
You're back.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for that signal. So, still on that loaf of bread, is it the shape of the loaf of bread? Is it the aroma? Is it the size? So the differentiation strategy is about becoming different. It's about fighting the market by becoming different. If you are a producer, if you are a dairy farmer, how do you make your milk different from your competitors? That's really the focus you are on. So really, looking at all this, that's why you see the differentiation strategy will be about recognizing the strategic position that should lead to strategic action. so that in the strategic position, you develop a sustainable competitive advantage. You, as it were, develop a unique value. You develop a unique brand. You redefine the core market message. For example, if you are, for example, Safaricom, what message do you take to the radio stations? What message do you take, for example, to the TV station about yourself? Strategic position is about how you position yourself as a company. Think of this if you are a school, if you are running a private school. So that look at the strategic position you will take as a private school, a private primary school, a private secondary school. How do you make your competitive advantage sustainable? How do you develop a unique value for the money that the parents pay? How do you brand yourself? Sometimes it could just be with that uniform, the make of that uniform. How do you advertise yourself? Then, once you have defined your strategic position, then you can now be able to define the strategic action that you are going to take. At this point, I would like some of you to demonstrate. Choose an organization, be it a school, be it an NGO. Try to demonstrate, to illustrate how you will create a sustainable competitive advantage. So choose whatever you want to explain in terms of strategic positioning. So announce the strategic positioning you want to take. For example, if it is a unique value, creating unique value. If it is branding, if it is core market messaging. So announce what you want to choose as a strategic position for your organization. You may also want to demonstrate strategic action. If it is, for example, to become remarkable, to create your market niche, to communicate your differentiated advantage. How will you create a differentiation strategy for your organization, for your school, for your company in terms of these differentiations? Anybody? Anybody? Yes, I can see Othello. Othello, would you like to try?
Yes, Malimu. First of all, before I bring up a brand, I would like to ask you some questions to provoke some discussion on
Yes,
the
please.
class.
Yes.
Yes. First, my question is this.
Yes.
Might you be knowing the reason why Nakumat and Uchumi collapsed? Why those two major, those giants, supermarket chains collapsed, and a very prosperous government supermarket chain, that we knew as Uchumi collapsed, and also Nakumat. Then I want to just bring the second part of my question will be that in the media, I used to do a lot of stories on these products in the market, especially food items and things like that. So we try very hard not to promote one brand over the other, but we just said we put characteristics that consumers look for. For example, some people here in this group, in this class, including yourself, Madam, could be familiar with super loaf, the bread called super loaf. So I will set a certain characteristics and say that this is what consumers are looking for. For example, if you are eating this bread, you won't find gravel in it. This particular what consumers are looking for is the food that we eat and they will enjoy eating, like that, something like that. So then we are not saying that super loaf doesn't have. But people will buy this bread, and consumers, that's why you have to learn, you study consumer behavior. They will buy this thing to try it. If it doesn't work, they move to the next one. So when they get this brand, and this brand is so nice, and Super Loaf became very successful and popular. Maybe Malini can disagree with me or thank you.
Good. Thank you very much, Othello. Now, I will evade your first question because of do I know why Nakumat or Uchumi collapsed? All I would say, if I would claim some reason, the reasons would be speculative, meaning that they may not, as it were, be depended upon unless somebody knows the exact reason. Rather, I would want to drive a discussion on your second contribution, whereby you're trying to tell us that one way of differentiating or developing a differentiation strategy, by giving an example of Superloaf, is asking ourselves, what is it that consumers are looking for? What is it that our customers are looking for? You see, without going deep into certain particularized arguments, a few weeks ago, there has been in media, they talk about Daystar University. We've been accused that why are we not behaving like a secular university? I'm putting it in the context of the actual meaning of the question. The question was, although it was not verbalized that way, the question was, why are we not behaving like a secular university, a secular, as it were, public university? But you see, the answer to that question is found in the question. The question is cyclic because the answer is found in the question. Why are you behaving like a human being? Come on, but I'm a human being. I'm behaving like a human being because I'm a human being. So can you get it? Why are you are asking me, why are you behaving like a human being? But I'm a human being. How else would I have behaved? So the whole idea here is, discovering, we've been accused, if you like, of emphasizing, one, on our nature as an institution, and the two, differentiating ourselves by providing what we think our consumers, our customers are looking for. To explain that, let's just, for example, turn on the next slide. It has a little bit of that explanation, what Othello was saying. The explanation is, we must discover, or rather, if you like, recognize the drivers of differentiation. We must ask the question, what are the drivers of differentiation? So that as Othello, you discuss the product Superloaf, and you've taken us through some explanation. The question is to say, what are our consumers, or what do we perceive our consumers or consumers to be looking for in a loaf of bread? What have we heard them say about a loaf of bread? When we met people in a supermarket, several customers, they were choosing which loaf of bread to pick. What did we hear that customer say about a particular loaf of bread? What reason did we hear her or him give for not choosing the other loaf of bread? We are now discovering the drivers of differentiation, the things that will make us be different. For us as an educational institution, a higher educational institution, what are the drivers for differentiation? Is it the unique product features? How do we define those unique product features? Is it the unique product performance, how this product performs? If it is a motorbike, which are being looked for by border riders, have we discovered that driver of differentiation in terms of performance? What about if we put in 2 liters of fuel? How many kilometers will that piki cover? Unique product performance. So you see, our strategy in the market, our differentiation strategy can be based on the unique product performance of those products that we make, as it were. Is it exceptional services? If we are a university, one of the questions to ask is, how do we define, for example, the kind of graduates we produce, for example? The graduates we produce, when they go to the market, do they help us to market our organizations? Do they help us to market our educational organization? Do they give exceptional services? When the students who are in this class finally graduate, the question is, when they go outside there, will people be able to say, will a company be able to say that next time I hire, whatever it is, people in a company, I'll be looking for a graduate of Daystar University, exceptional services? What about the technologies? What about the quality of input? What about the exceptional skill or experience? No? What about the detailed information in our products, as it were? So what, Othello, you are bringing to the table is, how do we recognize the drivers of differentiation so that we can effectively define our differentiation strategy? If I come back to the field of education, if you want to have a private school, I would like you to understand why sometimes people begin private schools, yours collapse and others continue. It's not because the others, are tycoons, are schools of tycoons. No, they're about these strategies. How do you recognize the drivers of differentiation in private education provision sector? That's how to understand these concepts of differentiation. Think about the features of the product you do. Think about the functionality. Think about the durability. Think about the branding of the image. Think about the value. Think about the support we give to the products we produce as elements that can help us define the drivers of differentiation. Anybody else, please? Anybody else would like to weigh in? In case there is anybody else who would like to weigh in? All right. So you see, that's what we are calling really differentiation strategy, as it were. So you must be able to recognize what are the drivers of differentiation. If you are in the education sector, what are parents looking for? What are learners looking for? If it is a church organization, you want it to thrive, what are people looking for? Like you see, we can talk about people yearning for God. So the question is, how do you define that yearning? Do you provide it in your church organization, as it were? So those are the various elements of really differentiation strategy. The next category of strategy is what we call the focused organizational strategies, the focused organizational strategies. You see, when we talk about focused organizational strategies, a focused strategy is an integrated set of actions that is designed to produce or deliver products or services that serve the need of a particular competitive segment competitive segment, call it a niche. Listen to those words, a focus strategy. You can understand these words by simply, listening to the concept. If it is cost leadership strategy, you want to become a cost leader. You want to offer the best cost to your customers for that product in the market. If it is differentiation strategy, you want to be differentiated. You want for customers to differentiate your product. You want your product to come out as unique, different. What are the things you attend to become different? If it is focused organizational strategy, the whole idea here is a focus strategy is an integrated set of actions that is designed to produce or deliver products or services that serve the need of a particular competitive segment. So that, think about some of the institutions of higher learning. Think about private institutions of higher learning. Think about even public institutions of learning. They are looking for students. The only way to attract students to your school, which is a private school, to your university, which could be a private university, is not by lowering fees. No. There are universities that have very high fees, as it were. They have very high fees. But when you look at the strategies, you find that despite the high fees charged in a given program, which is also offered in another program, there is always students on a waiting list. There are people applying, and when the class reaches this number, it is sealed, and you are told, wait for the subsequent year. What is the strategy? Focus strategy. You want to focus on a particular competitive segment. When you begin that private primary school and you are going to charge per term, say 250,000, the question is, who is your focused competitive segment? Whom are you targeting to become the parents, the learners in your school? When Daystar begins a program and it is likely to charge it higher than that program is being charged for in a given public university, the question is, what is Daystar looking for? What is the focused segment? Has Daystar discovered that there are members of the public who are looking for, a faith-oriented pedagogy, a faith-oriented degree program? Could that be the focus that Daystar is looking for? I'm giving examples for us to understand this, so that when you talk about focus strategies, you can look at this at two levels. Either the strategy is focusing on cost leadership strategy, is focusing on cost, so that you could bring down the cost because you are focusing people who are low earners, and many of them will come. You could focus on differentiation. We have just looked at these two. You could focus on differentiation because despite the fact that you are going to charge higher, you think there is a certain socioeconomic class of parents that are going to bring their learners in that school, as it were. So you can see, when we talk about the focused organizational strategy, we are talking about the idea of discovering what is the segment within the clientele that you want to focus on, and how do you bring your organization to address that kind of clientele. Now, focus strategies can manifest itself with some strength, can also manifest itself with some weaknesses. Looking at the strength of focused organizational strategies, what are the strengths? Remember, the idea here is you are focusing on a particular group of people, as it were. Number one, there is a substitute barrier. Substitute barrier. What this means, if you are producing several products in your organization, you are producing several products in your organization. Let me give an education example. For example, you are a school that is good at academics and also good at certain co-curricular activities. So that when you focus on investing in athletics, for example, it means you are going to bring a certain category of people as your clientele into your organization. They are going to be attracted to your organization. Now, if they come and they don't make it, for example, in academics, then there is a substitute. They are able to do something else. So you are discovering that there is that strength, the benefits. There is that benefit. There is something that a client will benefit if he misses on the other one. You focus on the specific group of people. There is effective entry, barrier, effective entry barrier. There is protection from competition, because now when you focus in something, you discover that your competitors, chances are they are not focusing on that particular element. Therefore, they are able, you are able to move forward because you see, you have protected yourself against competition, as it were. There is a less possibility of shifting loyalty. Your clientele has now trusted you, as it were. They have developed some loyalty to you. Talking about the example that Othello gave, Superloaf, for example, has developed, for example, certain loyal customers. Whenever they go to the shop, whenever they send their children to the shop to buy bread, they insist, buy Superloaf. So if you are the producer of Superloaf, and as Othello put it, perhaps you focused your production on a certain issue in differentiation, and then you see there is a less possibility that there is, if you like, there is minimal possibility that you lose your customers, as it were. So you can see there are those advantages for investing or for really drifting towards the focused organizational strategy. So the idea behind focused organizational strategy, you define the focus. You discover that this is the focus I want to focus to yield towards. And then you ask yourself, what are the customers, the clientele that you are focusing on? So you develop your product in the context of that focus and in the context of that clientele. The fourth type of strategy is what we call the growth organizational strategy, But perhaps before we look at that, sorry for this, it's important, I just forgotten this, to look at perhaps some limitation of the focused strategies, limitations, as it were. So you can see from that slide, beginning at the low level, they are difficult to achieve competence. You focus on something and you focus so much in terms of your clients. Clients love this. Perhaps clients love low-cost bread. So when they come to your shop, the idea, or they come to your company, you begin by quoting, when they pick a certain given type of dress and there is a marked price there, 2,000. And the chances are the customer responds, that is too expensive. So what do? You say, but this one is 500. Now, this is 500 because perhaps it's defined by given quality. So you discover that many of the customers that come to buy, some cloth in your shop, they prefer the one that costs 500. So in that way of doing, you now start stocking your shop with a 500 costed cloth. So that is how to understand there is a difficulty in achieving competence, as it were. Then there is a difficulty to move into the other. You focus on a given focus. I repeat that for repetition's sake so that to emphasize. You have a specific focus and you find it difficult to move to another because you feel that many clients trust that product or you have more clients within that product. I give this example. You do dairy farming, for example. You want to keep Asher cows. You want to keep Freshen cows. You discover that the Freshen cow produces more milk in terms of quantity, but low in quality. You discover that Asher animal produces milk which is low in quantity, but higher in quality. But because you want to leverage on costs, it becomes difficult now to do cost configuration because you remain there, as it were. So those are some of the limitations of the focus strategy, as it were. Now, in the growth organizational strategy, which is occasionally seen as the opposite, simply as the opposite of the focus one. This one, growth organizational strategy, refers to any activity within the organization that aims at increasing some variable within your organization. You'd want to increase the sales of existing products. You want to sell more milk. You want to sell more cloth. You want to increase the range of products and services you offer. You want to increase the size of the geographical area that you serve in the distribution of your loaves of bread. You want to buy out a competitor. You want to buy out that sugar production company, as it were, a competitor. So growth organizational strategy is about increasing some variable within your cleavage, within your organizational platform. So as I'm saying, either you want to sell more, either you want to increase the products you produce, either you want to distribute in a bigger geographical area, either you want to enlarge your company by buying off a competitor. So all these could serve as methods of stimulating growth and increasing a particular aspect of the business. However, in spite of that, it's important to note that, when you talk about growth organizational strategy, you want to grow an aspect of the organization. You must remember that growing given aspects of organization will always come with a concept of cost. You've also to remember that if you choose to adopt the growth organizational strategy, you need to take time to examine and think through the financial and personal costs associated with it. So when you look at this concept of growth organizational strategy, although at face value it looks very attractive, but you need also to remember that it is possible that it will become very costly, and therefore you find yourself drifting into the earlier mentioned strategies. Now, there are various components of growth organizational strategy that you want to look at, key growth strategies, the things to look for. So here we look at 7 components of business growth strategy. In other words, we are trying to ask ourselves, how do we develop a growth strategy portfolio within our organizations? How do you do it? How do you achieve the growth strategy within our organizations? One way of doing this is to hire the right talent. We are now seeing, how do you succeed in achieving organizational growth strategies? One way of doing it is simply hire the right talent. You could hire the right talent and be fewer in number, but the production goes higher. So growth strategy. Your production is higher and you brought down the expenditure that you spend, for example, in salaries. The second way of doing it is to define the value proposition. To define the value proposition. How do you define value? If you are beginning a private school and you want your school to grow in numbers, how do you define your value proposition? What do you want to stand out for? Do you want to be known as the school that invests in character development, for example, character growth, for example? If you define it that way and do it that way, that could attract more people to your organization, and that would cause growth. A third way of doing it is simply attending to the segment potential customers. By segment, we mean if you are a company that produces 2 or 3 products, so each of these 2 or 3 products defines a segment of clientele, a segment of customers, a segment of potential customers. So you've now discovered that this particular product is loved by more people. How do you invest more in that product so that you leverage on your profits, because more customers will come to you? You've now discovered in that school, despite the fact that you need the mean score, whatever, you've discovered more learners are likely to perform better in this particular subject. How do you leverage on that? The fourth way of attending or developing growth strategies is to identify the key success metrics. What is your point of success? I give you a personal example here. And I go back to the concept of dairy farming here to explain how you will identify key success metrics. For example, you run a dairy unit, you produce milk, and the market is so poor, you can't sell the milk. Does that mean you are likely to close down the dairy unit because your milk goes bad because you can't sell milk? No. How do you identify the key success metrics? Could it be by doing breeding? That will now define your key success metrics, so that you emphasize, you invest in the right seeds, you invest in the right breeding, so that at the end of it, your calves can fetch higher costs in the market. Identifying key success metrics within your organization. Another way of doing it is to assess current and potential revenue streams. What revenues do you have? What can you invest, as it were? So how do you maximize on the little resources in terms of revenue you have? Remember, at the end of it, you want to cause growth within the company. You want to cause growth within the organization. Another way of doing it is to benchmark against your competitors. What is your competitors good at? How can you leverage on that? Could this be the reason why, for example, some schools come up with an idea of doing common exams? They form teams of schools that they do common evaluation, common exams together. Remember, the aim is to come out by causing growth. Ultimately, you grow a company by building a competitive kind of management. How do you grow that? So these are the various key growth strategies that you can use to grow your company. The fifth organizational strategy is what we call the kind of category of organizational strategy, is that you can create organizational strategies by rationalization. You can rationalize. You can create organizational strategy by rationalization. Rationalization here is the recognition of a company in order to increase its operating efficiency. You know, you are reorganizing that company. You are replanning it. That is what we call rationalization. It may lead to expansion or reduction in the company size. It can also lead to change of policy. It can also lead to alteration of strategy pertaining to particular products and so forth. Rationalization simply means you are going down on the table and asking yourself, is this the right direction to take? Is this the right thing that you are doing? Rationalization is often thought of as the opposite of growth strategies. Growth strategies is, as it were, you want to grow the company. Rationalization occasionally focuses on, you may want to close certain products within the company and focus on one. For example, as part of your rationalization strategy, you may decide to discontinue a product. You may decide to lay off staff. You may decide to shutter some locations. You've been distributing bread, say, in 2 counties. You now say, no, I'll only distribute in 1 county. You may streamline operations, as it were. What we are saying here, while rationalization may look a lot like negative growth or a decline of some kind or some segment of the organization, it can actually result in financial growth of that organization. So how do you develop the rationalization organizational strategy, as it were? There are various ways of doing this. So you start at the application inventory here. You start at the application inventory. Application inventory, remember rationalization. You want to rationalize. You want, if you like, you want to justify why you have to do it this way, to rationalize. Rationalize meaning you are no longer just saying this is what the company does. You want to give reason for doing what you want to do. So you start by computing what we can call application inventory. This step involves creating a comprehensive inventory of all the applications the organization uses, including the versions, vendors, associated costs, and so forth. For example, if you are an organization, a company that makes bread, think about the cost of flour, the cost of raw materials, the cost of fuel, how you pay the drivers, where they distribute the loaves of bread, the fuel involved, in fueling those vehicles, how you pay, those who accompany the driver to deliver the loaves of bread and so forth. You are actually collecting, you are actually developing an application inventory. This is the first step, as it were. Then you move to the application categorization. Once an inventory has been established, the applications can be categorized based on their business value, usage frequency, and overall importance to the organization. For example, if you have, 50 lorries, find out how do we use the 50 lorries to distribute whatever product it is. If, for example, you you as it were, use, for example, buy a certain product to use in your company. Say, for example, laser printer, types of computers you use in your company. If you are a school, the types of pieces of chalks if you still use a chalkboard. If you are using the whiteboard, you buy white markers, whiteboard markers rather. You ask yourself, what type of whiteboard markers do you use? How frequent do you use them? If you normally invite, for example, to your company, guest speakers, how frequent do you invite them? What value do they add to your company, and so forth? Application categorization, application inventory. What do you do? Application categorization, those things you do. You now go into each segment. How do you do it? Then you come to the third level of rationalization, application rationalization criteria. In this step, specific measures are established for evaluating each application, such as the cost, the functionality, security risk, alignment with the business objectives, and so forth. So the cost of that fuel. If you've been buying particular types of counter vehicles, whatever it is, how do they function? What about in the rainy season? The roads are muddy. How do they function to reach the market? What are the security risks, for example? If you have computers in your farm, what are the security risks? And so forth. Application rationalization criteria. And then you come to the fourth level, whereby we do the application rationalization analysis. This is now the fourth level, when you do the application, as it were, rationalization analysis. And under this level, you've moved all the three levels. Under this level, with the criteria you've already established, a thorough investigation is conducted to evaluate each application value and determine which application should be retained, replaced, consolidated, or retired. So if you go back to the application inventory, you look even at your staff. Whom do you have? How many people have you employed? Application categorization. Employed to do what? You see? Application rationalization criteria. Employed to do what? But what is the quality of their functionality? And then application rationalization analysis. What does the company want to achieve? Can the company achieve its goal by using fewer? If it is vehicles you've bought in the company, can the company still achieve what it wants to do by using fewer vehicles than the ones you have? Could that be leading to the need to lay off the drivers? If, for example, you come from a sugar belt area in this country, some of those companies, they have employed, these truck drivers. Yet the product, the resource of sugarcane, has diminished among farmers. Should we continue as a company to pay those tractor drivers, as it were? That is now application rationalization analysis. You set a criteria. The criteria is most often what the company wants to achieve. So you ask yourself, can the company still achieve its goal with the fewer? And then the next level, as it were, the fifth level, is what we call the application rationalization roadmap. You've already identified, I can do with the 27 drivers instead of 52 drivers. You already discovered that I can do with this type of vehicle that consumes fewer fuel than the other one. So you now move to the roadmap, application of the rationalization roadmap, the roadmap for the rationalization. Now, based on the analysis, a roadmap now outlines a plan for rationalization, if you like, a plan for rationalizing the organization's software portfolio, including timelines, budget, and so forth. So now here, just to put flesh on this, a roadmap now is made how you are going to lay off the workers. Are you going simply to wake up one day and say, this is your last salary and you have perhaps 25% of the workers being laid off? Or are you going to argue the way some companies would argue when they want to lay off workers? The argument that those who came in last would be the first to be laid off, because occasionally you'll find fewer resources will be used. So once you've made the timelines, you've made the roadmap that by the end of this year, remember you are making up a rationalization strategy for your company. So it could be by the end of 5 years, maybe in your strategic plan, the company should have an employee portfolio of only 152 employees. Yet right now you have 500 employees. So you now spread this, you make a roadmap of how you'll be able to lay off this, how you'll be able to use some of the company's profits to be able to give what Kenyans popularly knew as golden handshake. Finally, you now implement the rationalization strategy. So here, the rationalization plan is now implemented, which may involve retiring obsolete applications, consolidating duplicate applications, or even replacing outdated applications with more modern and cost-effective alternatives. So you may argue that perhaps, you've been having, say, 75 trucks or vehicles. You don't need all of them. You've moved through the structure and you've discovered you don't need all this. You perhaps only need 25. So you now think of, how do we get 25 that are stronger to go through the muddy road, the muddy terrain of our roads? You think about, how are you able to be able perhaps to lay off some workers that you think they are less productive to the company? So that is how to develop the rationalization strategy for a company. The next type of strategy, category of strategy, is what we call the product innovation organizational strategy, which aims at ensuring that the organization achieves and maintains its competitive advantage. So the product innovation here refers to the creation and introduction of a product or a service that is new to the market, or a substantial or a novel repetition or a restatement of an existing product. So product innovation. Here, you've been producing a given product. Product innovation means, how do you strengthen that product within the market? Your unique value proposition helps you to focus on what differentiates you in the market. The idea here is, how do you develop reasons why you must invest more in that product? So product innovation. How do you make that particular product more innovative, as it were? So think about an example of manufacturers of phone handsets, for example. Could it be Nokia? Could it be Samsung? Could it be whatever kind of telephone handsets, phone handsets? So how do you insist on that particular product, Nokia, and you feel that people will still buy that Nokia? It will still bring the profits into the company. Remember, product innovation aims at ensuring the organization's competitive advantage. So people are buying phones, mobile phones. Perhaps you've discovered that most mobile phones, by the end of 2-3 years, they need replacement. So how do you continue to manufacture Nokia phones, product innovation? How do you innovate your product so that people still find a reason always to buy Nokia? Will it be that people have developed an idea that because of the innovation you've invested in the production of Nokia handset, people have discovered Nokia handsets tend to last, to stay longer. You can use a Nokia handset perhaps 4, 5 years, 6 years before you replace it. That's why we're talking about you must give yourself and your clients a reason to repeat, to reinstate that existing product. And this will be built in the uniqueness, the unique value of your product. So product innovation organizational strategy may include things like improvement in components or materials. You see, what are the components? What is it that handset can be able to do more than other handsets? Is it that you are increasing the storage capacity? Is it that you are increasing a certain feature? Remember, this is a product innovation strategy. You are innovating, adding value to the product you've had. Could it be that you are incorporating a certain software, but still calling it the name Nokia? Is it that you are adding to the technical specifications of that particular product so that there'll be some specification within that Nokia handset that will not be found in others? So all this plus other functional characteristics like user-friendliness and so forth may define what we may call product innovation organizational strategy. So product innovation is how brands really, like say Apple, have really, carved into the market. For example, in the production of Apple phones, for example, in the production of iPads and so forth. This is how they've made huge success through product innovation. Now, there are various types of product innovation that we can talk about. They include, for example, you may come up with a new product innovation. You may increase the changes of existing products. You may also develop new product features on a given product, as it were. All that can account for what we call product innovation. Now, in spite of this, there are general elements that if you wanted to invest in this, there are general elements of product innovation that you must be able to keep in mind if you wanted to invest in product innovation strategy. And by the way, as we talk about this, be thinking about the organization you belong to and be able to see when you talk about product innovation, what are you thinking about in that organization? So this is a summary of those elements that define product innovation. So in product innovation, we are either talking about new product development, you are talking about product improvement, you are talking about line extensions. You are doing this product, but you want to make more on that line. Is it that if you had this company, whatever Apple company, you begin with the mobile phone handsets, and then you move on iPads, whatever MacBooks and so forth, those kind of line extensions? Is it that in a product innovation, you are thinking about cost innovation that will attract customers so that the quality of the product is still very high, but the cost is coming down? Something like becoming cost leadership strategy. Is it how that product works? Process innovation, how it acts, how it works. Does it harm? After how long? Is it that you are investing in business model innovation? So all these are various elements, general elements of product innovation that you like to invest in. So as I've said, you may think about schools. What do you want to look at as product innovation? Is it the graduate you produce? How do you, this is how intricate organizational behavior, organizational strategies are. If you are talking about an education institution, you're asking yourself, is it about the graduates you produce? How do you innovate? How do you innovate the graduates you produce that when they come to the market, people find more value, people find improvement in that? So those are the general elements of what we call really product innovation strategy. The last type of organizational strategy is what we call the digital transformation strategy, which you may want also to try, the digital transformation strategy. So the digital transformation strategy really provides a high-level direction as to how digital technologies will be used to reach organizational objectives. So digital transformation strategy is actually an organization trying to define the place of the digital technologies in the direction of achieving its organizational goals, as it were. It may include things like organizational process improvement plans, plus any required shifts in organizational culture, so that you see, how do you innovate? How do you bring digital technologies? Yeah, that word is right to use. How do you innovate digital technologies into the processes of your organization? So a digital transformation strategy is actually, if you like, a conditio sine qua non in our organization. It is something that may not be avoided in organizations today. It defines every mode of success in organization. To look at, for example, our schools. We are now talking about the assisted computer technologies in instructions. We are talking about the LCD projectors in our classroom. We are now, even in some schools, no longer talking about chalkboards, even no longer talking about whiteboards, but instead talking about smart boards, as it were. So that you think about, if you are a trained teacher, were you to get to some of those schools, do you have the skills, for example, of using smartphone as smart boards, for example, in classrooms? You may have been trained, pedagogically on how to handle pieces of chalks to be able to write linearly on the chalkboard. But can you be able to write linearly on a whiteboard, for example? So these are some of the things we are talking about when we are talking about the elements of strategy within our companies, and of course, our organizations. So having said all this, we need to now understand, as we come to the end, the components of digital transformation. So as the figure you can see on the slide shows, we have about 5 components that are needed to execute an organization's digital transformation. So when you are talking about, when you look at this slide, the 5 components are actually defined in terms of people, data, insights, action, and results. Talking, for example, about people. Remember, people are the consumers, the consumers, if you like, the consumers of your products. So when you are talking about digital transformation, when you think about the first essential component of people, think about the people who will buy your telephony handsets. Think about in fact, not really the people who will buy, think about the users, as it were. Think about the employees you have in the company. Think about the clients. Now, talking about, for example, schools, universities. Some people have wanted to look at university schools in terms of, market profit-oriented organization, so that they have even looked and described students as clients. Not so. You see, how do you look at them? How do you look at your learners? In the beginning, I used the analogy of a candle. And I said, if you enter a dark room and you light a candle, you are doing some assignment. Do you ever notice that at the end of your assignment, the candle that you lit has consumed itself? So if you are a manager in a company, what is the place of people in the digital transformation of your company? So even as you think about the rationalization strategy in laying off people, what do you think, laying off actually of employees, what do you think about employees as persons, as it were? So people are an important element, component in digital transformation. Think about data. Think about data. When you're talking about data, the relationship here is that you have people, you have employees, you have your clients, whatever. All this can be turned. Remember, you are doing digital transformation of your organization. Now, all this can be turned into data by making what we are called the digital records. That's why you see in our slide, we are trying to say at the data level, we now make the digital records of 1, digital records of people, and evaluated results of 5. You now, in the data you keep in the company, in the organization, this data will help you to have records of the people who work there, records of the results of your company, as it were. And then the third component of digital transformation is insight. Number 3, the insight. Insight carries with it the concept of you are not just making data for its own sake. How does that data benefit the company, benefit the organization? So we talk about meaningful interpretations of the data that you keep. When you make that meaningful interpretation of the data that you've developed, you now gain insight into organizational development. The fourth element, the fourth component, is what we call action. So remember, the people you have, the data you keep, the insight you get. Now, this insight must lead to a change in action, change in behaviors, change in the decisions you make in that company, change in the strategies you develop in that company, so that when all said and done, you cannot simply say this organization from time immemorial, it operates on cost leadership strategy, or it operates on differentiation strategy. How does the data transformation strategy lead your company to change the strategies that that company uses or defines? Then finally, we talk about results, whereby we talk about the quantification of those results. You quantify the impact, you quantify the utility of the action that we have. So you see, all this can be grouped into three major categories: the area of digitization, the area of analytics, and the area of operationalization. If you like, you have the technology there, the people who are working, and the data being kept. You have the data science, how you get insights from the data you develop. Then you have the process, the people culture, how these ones are put together. Insights you develop must be turned into action. Develop a way of acting within that company and a way of doing things, actually, as it were. And then that leads to new ways of doing things. You can now see what digital transformation is really all about. So, dear friends, we have been able to look at all those elements. You can be able to see those various elements of organizational strategy. What is important is that any organization strategy you come up with, whether they be cost leadership, whether they be differentiation, whether they be forecast and so forth, they must be able to exhibit 7 important characteristics. They must be realistic. Realistic in the sense that if, for example, last year you made profits of 50 shillings in your company, don't set for next year 1,000 shillings. Be realistic. They must be measurable. You don't define organizational strategies by saying to become better this. What is better? It must be measurable, quantifiable, as it were. Remember, Professor has always told you in research, we talk about what is measurable is achievable. If it is not measurable, it's hard to achieve, as it were. Organizational strategies must be specific. You must address a specific element in your organization. Is it to increase the student numbers? Is it to produce, graduates of an upright character? Be specific what you want to achieve in your organizational strategies. And then they must be limited, as it were. Sometimes we talk about being time-bound. They must be limited so that it must be known that this strategic plan or strategic definition is going to run for a given period of time. And then they must be coordinated so that in an organization, if you have various teams, we've studied about organizational teams. If you have various teams, there must be a way what team A is doing and what team B is doing, they are coordinated towards the common organizational goal. If it is a school, what the humanities department is doing and the mathematics department is doing, chemistry department is doing, is coordinated towards that overall school objective about the results, as it were. They must be focused. Organizational strategy must be focused. It should not simply be generalized. It must be focused. Of importance, organizational strategy must be delegated. You find this very much in the definition of what we call organizational strategic plans. What will be done, and it will be done by who? So everything cannot just be done by one team. Everything cannot be done by everybody. Everything cannot be done by the top management or the CEO. You must delegate. However, as you delegate, you must always remember the principle of delegation. When you delegate, you must supervise. So, dear friends, this content I was trying to run through so that we reach that end. you notice we've not been able to make a coverage on organizational culture. I'll be developing some assignment on that, which I hope should be the last assignment in this course, so that we should be able to cover organizational culture through assignment. Next, I think we are still remaining with 1 or 2 topics, then we are done. I don't know whether there are some observations before we end this class. Mothoni?
Thank you, Doc. Mine is just a request or kind of reminder.
Yes.
You haven't shared the notes we've been waiting for, like for the last 2 or 3 classes. Please
Yes,
do.
yes. Please. And now, let me see. Mothoni, I've heard you. This is who? Let me see. Who will take upon himself, herself to remind me this? Normally, the challenge is when I finish these classes this night, I'm normally so tired. I don't remember. But I think I want to request somebody to mark time me tomorrow and to make sure that latest by Sunday, it is shared. Who would like to do that? Chris, are you here?
Okay.
I
Who is
will.
here?
I will.
Yes, somebody should mark timing on that. Mark timing means send a reminder and make sure I respond to that reminder by telling you something like I'm going to do it. Sometimes they are sent when I'm so busy with the classes in the day, and then I forget. When evening comes, oh, you forget. But I'll try to do it. Anybody else with a comment? Anybody with a comment? All right.
This is Gaki.
Yes, Gaki.
Generally, what I'm picking from the topic on organizational strategy, one
Yes.
key thing is that organizations exist with the structures and not vacuums. That way, there is a particular dimension in which people tend to measure the goals, as you've outlined, so that it's not just today, it doesn't operate on feelings. Today, I want this. Tomorrow I don't feel like it, no? And I think that's the beauty of it, so that we have a place of reference and what keeps and guides us. Thank you, Dr.
A very good observation, Gaki. Thank you. Frank?
Yes, good evening, Dr.
Good evening to you, Frank.
So you have said that you're going to give us another work. I was asking if that is the final assignment.
Yeah, I've said so. I'm also convinced it should be the last one.
So you are not going to be tested again for the main exam, or there will not be main exam.
Now, my thinking is this, and we could discuss it here. We could discuss it here, and the beauty of dealing with adults is that you can be able to reach consensus. What is in my mind is this, but you may intervene and help it change or help it become better. That this be given as an assignment, which should be the last assignment in content coverage. And then I should be able to post this perhaps tomorrow. And then we give the terminal term paper. What are your views? You remember terminal term paper as it came last semester?
Yes.
Yes. What are your views? Maybe can I listen to Frank still? Yes, Frank.
Yes, for me, I was thinking that you should administer this term paper as early as now, so that at least we prepare or we start working on it as early, because we have a lot of assignments together with, we are preparing for the thesis.
Correct.
At least we
Dr. I have a different opinion.
Yeah, I've heard you, Frank. That what you said is in my mind. Let me listen to that different opinion from who? From who is this?
Silvano.
This is Silvanos.
Yes, my opinion was, what if you make a quiz that we can do online in one of the lessons, and then we just finish it in the lesson, like multiple choice questions, maybe.
All right. So Silvanus, you are trying to say instead of an end semester terminal paper like we did last semester, we replace it with a one-off, what people sometimes call sitting assignment, correct? Have I
Yes.
understood you well, Silvanus?
Exactly, that's what I mean.
Now I listen to, who is this? Is this Stella? Did I see Stella's hand up?
Yes, my hand is up.
Yes, Stella.
My proposal was to also consider the term paper to be as group work.
Term paper to be group work. So it still is worked on as a term paper. So yours coincides with the first view. We are going to agree. At the end of it, we are going to agree. I'm picking those ideas and sieving them up. I've heard you, Stella. Taslin?
Thank you. I would like to disagree with Stella. For a term paper, doing it as group work is very hard. So if it's term paper, then let it be individual, or we go the way Silvanus has said, that we have a quiz that is something that we can do during the class hour. Thank you.
Good. Macho?
I think, Mwalimu, for the course that we are doing, I don't think a quiz will suffice. If everybody was in Prof's class yesterday on leadership, it's more internalizing the issues and being able to apply as opposed to a quiz. For me, a quiz tends to limit in terms of there's a specific answer. A term paper allows you to explore and apply. So for me, individual term paper would make sense. If you want to also administer, a short assignment based on what you've taught us now, that's okay. But I believe a term paper, if we know it early enough, it will be helpful. But not a quiz. Thanks.
All right. I've heard you. I have to listen to Amata. Amata has had his hand up. Amata?
Yes, Daktari, good evening.
Good evening, Amata.
I think I will disagree with making a term paper to be group work, because putting people together at the end of the semester will be somehow tedious. And then I will go with your plan of giving us maybe a short assignment and then a term paper. But probably give us that term paper in good time so that we can begin working on it.
All right. All right. I think I've heard. What I've heard is that it seems to many not advisable that we do the end terminal evaluation as a group. That is what I've picked from what I've heard.
Just a clarification. I meant
yes.
this third assignment to be the group work, not the term paper.
And then that's okay. That's okay. That's okay. That's okay. So the terminal one should be individual, and perhaps to think about the possibility of the forthcoming, which will be the final course coverage assignment, to consider it being a group work. I think can we agree on all of us on that?
Daktari, I'm not for group work. I don't know if I'm speaking on for a majority of people here, because putting people together at the end of the semester when we have a lot to do, I think it's challenging.
Let's do it this way. Can everybody put his hand down? Can everybody put his or her hand down? They are still, yeah? Can Silvanus put his hand down? Silvanus? Yes, very well. Now, who are for? There are two options. The first option is we have agreed, actually we have agreed on the terminal one, we have agreed it shall be individual assignment and not multiple choice. An essay individual, that one is agreed. Where the issue is on whether we can make the forthcoming assignment. By assignment, I mean it is not terminal, whether we can make that assignment group or individual. So hands up, those who fail the forthcoming assignment should be group, hands up. Those who fail the assignment should be group, hands up. Yes, those who fail should be group, hands up. All right. Yeah, there are 8. Those who fail should be group, there are 8. Hands down. Those who failed, it should be individual. So those who fail, it should be individual. Those who fail, it should be individual. Those who fail, the forthcoming assignment should be done individually. Right? So the vote is 15. No, 16, right? 16. All right, hands down, everybody hands down. So you can be able to see there is quite a sizable number of those who don't know. It always happens where human beings are. There's quite a number, over 10, whatever, those who do not know. But anyway, it seems it shall be individual. So it seems it shall be individual. So I think it's concluded. So I think that is the last thing we discussed to end the class. I would like to take this chance, always as usual, to say it is not taken for granted. What we've learned in this class as organizational strategy, go forward and implement it in the organizations you belong to. Help those organizations, help the employees, even help the management of that organization if you are not a manager, to develop workable organizational strategies that can really respond to the empirical situation that those organizations find themselves in. Always remember that wherever we find ourselves, to become instruments of the love of God and service to the neighbor. We pray. We thank you, God, for the gift of life. We thank you for the gift of the knowledge that you continue to shower over us. Help us by the use of this knowledge to become useful instruments in the world you place us. Help us to become an ingredient that will make our organizations better by the knowledge we achieve. May we become instruments of organizational development and organizational change. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. Good night.
Amen.
Amen.
Good night.
Right.